Rancher.
Yeah, rancher. For him to come out of his comfort zone to contact the military to say, hey, there's something a mile-long crash out here in my field. And that's another thing. A weather balloon is not going to create a disturbance on the earth almost a mile long or half mile, whatever it was. And then I believe the radio station or newspaper next day was running reports on it, and they shut them down. And then they shut the whole thing down and made that poor major say, oh, it was just a weather balloon. I mean, come on. None of those facts add up, especially from a seasoned major. Yeah, that's the one that really gets me.
Well, don't forget, that major made colonel. Okay?
Oh, did he?
Yeah, eventually, and then he never went any farther past that. I wonder why.
It sounds like a compromise. It sounded like, we'll get you a colonel, and that's where you're going to freeze.
Well, they didn't say colonel. Basically, if you did something and he jumped the gun and announced to, the world, hey, we got a crash UFO here, at Roswell. What do you think is going to happen to you? If it wasn't cleared by the Pentagon, if it wasn't cleared by the White House and all that stuff, chiefs of staff, your career for going in the military and staying, I should say, in the military and get like rank of colonel and general is never going to happen. You're going to get up to a certain point, and that's bars. You're going to get passed by.
And you also jeopardize your career outside of the military in your other life. I mean, they can, the government can shut you down in many ways. They could discredit you so many ways of Sunday, let me tell you. And here's the other thing. Even if it was legit, why would our government admit it? Because especially when you're in a Cold War with Russia, my goodness, you wouldn't dare want them to know that. I mean, think about it.
Well, no, you certainly wouldn't. And it's just so many things happen at Roswell. Like the fire chief, the fire department, they were told to keep their mouth shut. It never happened. They were kind of threatened. The sheriff was threatened, or the chief of police. Then even the undertaker, the story behind that, he was told the same thing, not to say anything. And anybody who saw anything of the bodies or of the wreckage were told not to. And not just them, they were threatened. Okay? The guys in the suits came to their house and they said, basically, you can't say anything or this is going to happen to you.
Right. I have seen interviews from actual witnesses. One of them was a lady that they came, pretty much what you just said. They came to her house and said, look, that desert is very big out there, and nobody will ever find you, pretty much is what they said to her, so you need to keep your mouth shut. Also, supposedly the nurse, when you spoke of bodies, she was there on the scene with that undertaker or whatever. They ordered him small caskets, supposedly, allegedly. And you're talking about a lot of witnesses there. And I believe that nurse on her deathbed still stayed to her story that there was, no alien bodies.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's just the whole point. And even some of the people who originally passed on, their children remember seeing like this metal. You could crump it all up in a ball, and it would come back in its normal shape. And you could crumple it up again to real tight little, walnuts, and it would come right back to its normal shape. Do you know of any metal here that does that?
No. Now, we're an experimental stage of memory metal like that, but not near what that is. Could you imagine the applications we could do with that kind of metal? Just think about that.
Well, the way my wife drives, she would, have no dents in her car. I can tell you that. You know how much it would put body and fender out of business, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. It sure would. Oh, my goodness. Don't even get me going on insurance and cars and stuff.
Yeah, I won't do that. But no, seriously, if you had metal, right, and you made devices out of it and it got damaged, it fixed itself. So that tells you how far the technology was. I'm just wondering if these radars, seriously, because back then the radar was not like it is today. It was broadband. It was in a low frequency range. And who knows how it could have interfered with the operation of the UFO. It's the way it works. It could have jammed it and caused it to crash.
Well, that's a good point, because I've often had the theory that these craft, I think they could be a combination of a biological and a mechanical device, and with the being in there can run it through their mind. And with that, if that's true, then yeah, radar with these frequencies and waves and stuff, that's a valuable way to maybe make it crash.
No, they didn't probably make it crash. It was probably that, that the alien UFO flew in the area where the radars were, and that was history. That was it.
Oh, yeah, I don't mean they did it intentionally. I think it was an accident by all means, but nonetheless, something came down. It wasn't a weather balloon. I don't believe that for 1 minute. And I do know that they tried to say it was that mogul project where they had dummies dropping them from a balloon. But that doesn't line up because that project came out, I think, a year or two or after that. So
yeah, years after that. Okay, years after that.
Right, and I've heard them try to use that as an excuse. And here's the other funny thing about all this. Do you remember a few years back when they came out and said, yes, we lied, had secret balloons and stuff, and we didn't want people to know. So if they admitted to that lie, that's just a lie on a lie. If you think about it, they'll lie about anything.
Well, yeah. Well, they're trying to cover their tracks, okay? I think it's time, seriously, that the government should come forward, okay, and say, look, Roswell did happen. Yes, there is UFOs. And yes, we did recover the wreckage of it. And yes, we covered the bodies. And maybe one of them lived for a while, too. We probably experimented with it. And, clear it up. I mean, that would clear up the whole thing, wouldn't it? Quite a bit. If you want disclosure, there it is.
Yeah, that would. Now, I do remember Colonel Corso, even on his deathbed, was saying that they had an alien, and they were going to, the alien told him if they didn't release him, that it was going to be a lot of trouble for mankind, and he helped him escape, so to speak. But there's all kinds of stories out there like that, and these people admitted on their deathbed. So why would they lie on their deathbed about this kind of stuff?
Well, Corso, he probably never made the rank of general. Okay.
No, he didn't.
You know why?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because he had a big mouth, and he said something he shouldn't have. He said a UFO crashed. But supposedly, by a general, he was put into a department. It slowly released, information and devices for people, big companies could, like fiber optics, where they could, break it down and figure out how to make it. I don't know if that story was true or not. It does sound, he was very credible, in the Army Air Force. So, I mean, I just think, he was persecuted in a way because he never went past colonel. He went from major to colonel and just sat there.
Yeah, that was kind of like the holding pattern. I think that's a procedure they use. But yeah, he had mentioned about Kevlar and night vision and fiber optics and all kind of stuff like that they slowly,
that was his job. That was his job, to release that to companies to, replicate it.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, I mean, we went from the 40s with, them big old tubes and everything to pretty quickly went to without those. And that's a pretty good jump if you think about it.
Oh, yeah. Well, put it this way. My dad was electronic engineer for Boeing's. I remember in the 50s, I was born in 52, so late 50s, I started getting, I used to go out, my dad had a workshop at home, and he was always tinkering stuff and inventing stuff. And it's very bad, though. If you work at Boeing's and you invent something, you don't get it. Boeing's does. But anyway, at least back when he was alive. But you know what? I was really interested in electronics. That's when I got the bug on it. We went from the 50s all the way to the late 50s, big tubes, okay?
Right.
And then the transistor was invented. That was a major step, okay? So now you could build stuff with transistors, and you didn't have these heavy tubes, generated heat and took more power and all this stuff, and could produce actually more output than the tubes could. So you had the transistors. And then it went into integrated circuits, big integrated circuits. Then the integrated circuits that were big started getting smaller and smaller. And now you can take a circuit that you'd have to use a magnifying glass to see it that can do what a whole bunch of array of tubes did. Could you imagine the original computers back in the mid-50s? banks of these computers with tubes and all this heavy equipment in it. Is this strange how we went from tubes to transistors to integrated circuits in such a fast pace? Because you look at how long we were in the tube state from the tubes from around early 19
turn of the century.
Yeah, turn of the century. Then all of a sudden, how many years is that when you go up to like 55, 56, 57, then the transistors start coming out, or even a little bit later than that. How long it took to go from tubes to transistors. Then from transistors to IC chips was like a flip of a switch. Scary, isn't it?
Absolutely. And here's another thing to ponder. That integrated circuit that you're talking about. Now, remember all the implants we've talked about in people that Dr. Lear has pulled out? Those implants are probably so advanced and intricate circuits in there that it's mind-blowing to us. So that kind of gives you a blueprint of where we might have got some of that technology. Not on that scale, but, there it is.
Well, I think maybe the integrated circuits came, probably, I hate to say it, from maybe somewhere else. I know who invented the transistors, okay, or transistor. Okay, that was invented. That was a major step. But to go from a transistor to an integrated circuit is like a night and day type of thing. And I think without major technology more than we had at that time frame, I don't see how it could have happened.
Right. I mean, that's like going from a horse and buggy to driving a Corvette. I mean, it's there's no missing link. It's just like boom.
Oh yeah, and like Sam just said, now we have quantum processors. I mean, technology is jumping so fast. It is really scary, and I think a lot of this technology was not our technology. It was technology that we managed to, capture from alien technology that gave us a jump on it. Fiber optics, that's another one.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
It's for somebody, at that time frame to invent fiber optics without it doesn't even make sense. If you have to look at things, okay? Again, let's go back to 1870s, 1890s, okay? Again, if I hand you a transistor radio and say, "Hey, what do you think of this?" You're going to look at that, right? And you're going to think I'm evil or came somewhere else, and they're going to lock me up, or they're going to start a fire, even that late underneath me, because God, it's something that could not exist. It's scary how fast technology is jumping. So I think we've gotten help. Or it's been technology that we recovered from one of these aircraft or, spacecraft.
I definitely think there's a two-front fold on that. One, I think we've got some technology from the UFOs. And another one, I think we've made deals with them. I really think we made deals with them saying, "Hey, we'll turn our head, abduct a few people, do what you got to do, feed us a little bit of information of technology." And I think there was a trade there, and I think it's still going on today.
I think so. I mean, come on. Come on. The government has one thing, okay? It's thinking of itself. We're all into the arms race. We're all into making a bigger bomb. We all are in for national security, okay? So regardless how they get that, they're going to take it. If they have to sacrifice some humans.
Absolutely. I mean, here's an example. Look at Tesla when he died in 1943, I think it was. It was within, minutes they had all his information.
Oh, yeah. Hey, James, I'm going to have to cut you through. I got to, do some breaks for the stations. I'm glad you were with me the first hour. I'm going to tell people, do not storm Area 51. Please, if you have a loved one, think of them. Don't do something stupid. James, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Tomorrow it's going to continue on, current things that's going on with Area 51.
All right. Have a good night, and I'll be listening in. Bye-bye.
Okay, you take care. So anyway, it makes me wonder what is going on with Area 51. Doesn't it make you wonder? It sure does with me. Anyway, we're going to be back in about 3 minutes. We're doing the station break. for all the stations. We are now carrying 18 stations on Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark. You can check our website out at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com.